Okay. Yeah, let's do it. So, my first question for this week is talk to me about the yoga tradition from your unique perspective as a quadrilingual Greek, Finnish, first generation American psychedelic using longtime tantric practitioner.
Wow. Talk about a psychedelic question. And I have to say, I love, the word Greek is a really rich language. And I thought it was just my dad being a linguist. We would make up words all the time, even in English. Like language is pretty flexible and elastic.
Yeah.
But then I learned that all Greeks do that. And when we look at these kind of root languages, like Sanskrita, even Hawaiian. They're in Hawaiian, they call it kauna. And kauna means that something has multi layers. So in in the yoga tradition, it's called shruti. And shruti means that, well, it has a lot of layers to it. So it means there's the sound. And I remember buying a shruti box, which is like an electric tambura, the drone for chanting. And I asked the young woman, I said, well, what does shruti mean? And she said, well, it means sound. And when you go out of Western traditions, you learn to ask the question many times because you're going to get deeper layers, right? You start to kind of pull in the subtlety. And so I asked her and I said, well, does it mean anything else? And she said, it means tone. And then I said, well, that's interesting. And so what do you mean by tone? And she said, vibration. And I just kept like very gently. I mean, you have to romance. You can't be there banging on the door, but really with an open heart, be curious and say, hey, like I'm available for more. And she said, it means the deeper meaning. So even the word psychedelic, from my understanding, it comes from the Greek psyche telia. And telia is a word that is still used in modern Greek. It means like awesome, like the most excellent or the maha. And psyche, of course, is the root of psyche. And so psyche is the breath, the spirit, the soul, and it's symbolized as the butterfly, which is this metamorphic journey. Of course, we start as this kind of a larvae. We come into this world as a larva, and then we have to be cocooned and go on this inward journey. And then when we come out, we get to spread our wings and see what kind of birds we are. So really, to me, that very much encapsulates the yoga tradition. And so we come, we ask to be taught. Traditionally, the teacher would accept the student. The teacher chose the student. So a student might come and demonstrate their interest, their commitment. And there's wonderful lore about the arduous testing process that teachers gave their students, like Mila Repa. Oh, that's a great one. And they had to prove that they were committed, that it wasn't just a fleeting interest, etc. So the teacher would then accept the student, and there was often, there were parameters. So that's the sense of like the cocoon. It's like, you're going to commit to this. You're going to be doing this. I know my teacher's teacher, Krishnamacharya, when he found Sri Rama Mohan Brahmacharya, and he trekked 21 miles. No, I'm sorry. I think it was 211 miles into the Himalayas and found him. He was living in a cave. With the stories relay that he had something like 13 children. and he was just living there up, in the high Himalayas. And Krishnamacharya said, I've come to learn with you. And Rama Mohan Brahmacharya, he said, well, I'm not taking students. And so Krishnamacharya sat down outside of his cave and he said, that's all right. I'm patient. I'll wait till you are. And he waited all day and waited all night. And I guess, there was a bit of contrition. Maybe it was, let's just call him Rama Mohan. His wife came out, offered a chapati, and he said, no, I'm not hungry. I'm just hungry for the teachings, and sat there for 3 days. And finally, Rama Mohan Brahmacharya, he said, all right, I'll take you on as a student, but you have to commit to stay as long as I deem necessary. I have an Indian friend, Newton, and she calls, drop-in students dropouts. And I'm not sure if it's an error or not, but it's really great. This sense of like in Greek, it's mezes or poo-poo. Like, I'm going to try a little bit of this. I'm going to try a little bit of that. But there's a commitment to really learning and growing. And certainly there's repetition involved, but we go to deeper and deeper layers. So that's really the mentor tradition, is that it becomes like a family member. So there's real love, there's real care, there's an investment of your time, of your energy. And a great yogi, why can't I think of his name right now? Oh, George Harrison. He said that the way that we demonstrate our love is how we share our time. So we take that time, and there's so much more than just executing practices. It's about our psyche, and our psyche includes our body. It includes our mind. It includes our emotions, and it's the relationship of our inner world to the outer world. So yoga is that relationship. And it's interesting too, because I know in the ancient Greek tradition, and there was a great diaspora between Greece and India during the time, during that golden era. There was this grand exchange of insights. The mentor tradition was very strong, and it continues to this day, where even outside of a traditional schooling situation, a child will have a tutor, but it's more than a tutor. Again, there's real love, there's care. It's kind of an extended family. So that's really where I feel like I've just been so blessed, because I've really had long-term relationships with my teachers. There was a real investment and there was a real care. Yeah, I hope that, that was a big question. So I tried to touch upon it.
That was great. Two things come to mind is right now we're in this participation award generation. Have you heard of this?
No, but I get a sense of it.
Yeah, you get the sense is like there's, in many of the school systems, you get an A for effort. And it's the mood, the sentiment of it is really great on one hand, because it's trying to be inclusive, and on the other hand, it's in my sense of things, it's really watering down the striving that many young people have to win or to achieve or to do their very best. And that's what I'm getting. It's like these were real people walking 200 miles uphill in the snow both ways. Like, this was the real deal. And so I'm wondering, maybe you have a thought on that. And then coupled with, is the age of the guru dead? Is the age of a real master's, where are they?
Wow. It's interesting from my understanding, before karate came to the West, there was no belt system. And, so that was something that was amended because it worked with the psychology of Westerners. So, I like to think of the hemispheres of the world. And this is actually, it's kind of like the non-binary consciousness that is happening. And this is an evolution of our species where men have very nurturing and feminine aspects, and women have, more tenacious, outward, effective. There's like a shift. It's almost like a shift on the axis where we go from patriarch to matriarch. So I don't really have a problem with that. I love the fact that, my son sometimes wants to wear my dress, or that there's not even role reversals, but there's more elasticity in that. So I don't know, if I need to necessarily compare them. I guess as I'm becoming more seasoned, I can just see that everything's kind of shifting and changing. And from what I understand, what's been relayed to me in quantum physics, that everything is changing, and the more it changes, it becomes itself. So, whatever carrot or enticement, people have their own timing. So perhaps, if that's what works with the Western psychology, eventually they're going to get there. As much as, we don't want to do that, we want to have people just feel the reward of investing themselves. And as Patanjali says in the sutras, right? Tivra samveganam asanaha. If you're deeply interested, you're already successful, because that level of engagement and inspiration and enthusiasm, what more could you want? What more could you want? So whatever kind of works for people, I don't really know in that way. As far as the age of the guru, I think it's that guru is a really big blanket term. And so in my book, I kind of show, and I think it's from the Kula Arnava Tantra text, if I'm recalling correctly. There's all different kinds of gurus. So there's the one who you meet at the gym, who turns you on, right? Then there's the one who's more skilled in understanding the nuances of the practices. Then there's one who understands the deeper teachings. And so we're going to kind of graduate in different ways. And then there's the one who, just by being in their presence, there's a shift in your vibrational field, because we're sympathetic beings. So I do believe that I remember a friend saying, "Oh, you live on Kauai? Everybody's a guru there." And they said it with great innocence, but it's kind of true. It's like, now when we can read a book, or we can, listen to a podcast, or do a weekend workshop and become a shaman, maybe the standards are shifting, but as they say, the cream floats to the top. I think it's challenging to find someone who is of such a high caliber, who's basically like a living saint, but they're out there. They're probably pretty hidden. Maybe it's the age of the student that's kind of ending. And,
Yeah.
I remember talking to my friend, it was a really skilled practitioner, Johnny Smith. We used to travel a lot to Mysore. He was my buddy. And Patabi Choice, he used to call us Johnny Bhavani. And his, so many people wanted him to teach. And for a long, long time, he was like, the last thing we need is more yoga teachers. We need more yoga students. So yeah, that's my response. my roundabout espounds, my sutra-like kind of a thing. I really don't know. But it's a very, very slippery slope to want to be a guru. Guru means heavy and it means big. It's the planet Jupiter, and where we think the Earth is held in the sun's magnetic field, it's actually Jupiter that's holding it all. So to be big enough to be able to hold it all, and also to be a guru, you have to have been a student. So how many people have truly been a student? And those who are students, they don't want to give up being a student. So yeah, it's and being a guru also, it means that you're caring your students because you care about them. So I don't know, it's something that I would wish on anybody. I certainly don't wish it for myself. It's really just being curious and having community is wonderful enough. And then what is the guru is actually, well, it says it in the sutras too. Let's see if I can remember this sutra here. I might have to look it up. Ishvara prani danadva klesha karma vipakashayira paramarishta purusha vishesha ishvaraha tatra niratishayam sarvajna bijam sa purvesham api kuruhu kale nanavachetat. That really, it's the aspect of having a conduit to source. So as soon as we try to personify someone or deify someone, we get into trouble. But when we realize that the teachings are, and the teacher is a way of accessing source directly, there's going to be a greater balance. And we'll see this a lot in spiritual communities when the the center of that community or the guru of the community dies, there's a wobbling period. And hopefully the community holds the practices as a way of connecting to source, and the Sangata, the way of discussion, of healthy discussion, where there's a balance of power, where there's a, as Patanjali says, when two or more are gathered, there's samadhi because we have multiple perspectives. So when there's that kind of a community, the teachings will remain at the center, and the teachings aren't rigid because they have to be practical and apply to what's needed. They have to be viable as far as our psychology. They can't be rigid. And that's part of that oral tradition. So then they'll just be kind of like a resettling of the community. But as we can see historically, oftentimes someone wants that power. And yeah, just Google that and see what comes up. It was like when A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, so he came over from India. I think he had like 3 rupees in his pocket, and in the yogic tradition, they were taught not to cross water, and who knows why. But if you died a death on water, the belief was that you could not take Mahasamadhi. You could not have, spiritual release from this lifetime. So he basically risked his own salvation to come across the water, and just started chanting in the park in New York City, and people started becoming interested, and it became ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And then when he died, I think he left like 4 swamis to lead the community. And within a few years, one had been murdered, one had been beheaded. I mean, it's really, who really knows the inside stories? But Netflix is like full of these stories, and the the distortions that can take place. Yeah.
Oh, I like what you said. It's the age of the student. I mean, I've heard you say this many times that when the student is ready, the guide will appear. And it's for me that answers the question because it really is, it's not about out there finding someone or something out there. It's about in here. And then when I'm ready as a student, I will be led. So, and I've found that in my life to be true.
And that's what I love so much about like the sutra, you know, because the sutra are they're the original DNA strands of yoga. It's like all the wonderful wisdom that we've heard just whittled down to the core essence. And then when you come into a community like I did with, it's sitting with my teacher Rama, who never professed to be a teacher. She was truly a student and a practitioner, and then just sharing the stories. This is when that samadhi happens, where we're just it just like it ties all the pieces together. And so for me, I feel like I know from a deep place within me that it's the teachings that are teaching me. And the teacher is just someone who is breathing prana into it, breathing their own soul, their own spirit, their own process, and validating the human experience. I mean, what is this need to find perfection? I think that's kind of circling back to your statement. I forgot the word that you used. What was it that you used about the acknowledgement or the certificate of participation or whatever
The
it was?
participation award.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think, yeah. And yoga for me runs in this vein that's just outside of, the even, even these questions. It's like the wanting to know, it's like the answer it just touches the outside of it. And for me, that's the vein of yoga, and I have to lean into that.
And I love what it says in the sutras, right? About look, there's phases, there's a growing up process that happens. And initially we just need to get an ego that's healthy enough where it can stand on its own two legs. And it takes a long time it takes a whole lifetime to get your feet underneath you. We're basically born fish. We're these aquatic kind of beings. And the sense of samastitihi, of even standing, of being upright, of upholding, of being able to feel your connection to the earth and your connection to the world and your connection to gravity, which some say gravity is God, that you're part of a bigger field. So there's that raising up. That's where we do need the mentor and we do need the teacher and someone who really cares, someone where the system isn't underpaying them, where they're so constrained in the red tape and the bureaucracy, which I see in the schooling, the education system. It's like, they just suck the life force out of the teachers. They're not supported. So we need that. And once the ego gets healthy enough, then we can let the ego go. And the ego comes into service to the soul and to the community and can hold space for the larger community. But what does Patanjali say about the ego? He says that Darshana Shaktyor Yekatmateva Smita. The ego is thinking you are your thoughts, that you own what you know, and that you are the vehicles of knowing. that is what creates the ego construct. So the ego gets built up by what it thinks it knows. So then as we get, as we become more seasoned and we have a sense of, yeah, I know this and I have a foundation and we know it well, then the great adventure is to just be able to like throw it away and let it go and see that we actually live in a very illogical, magical, mysterious field that is alive and ready to respond to our own creativity. And that's super exciting to me. So it takes some time, it does take some time, and there's a ripening process that happens. Yeah, but there's a lot of neophytes out there, a lot of half-baked people, and it's okay. But just own it, I understand, because it's like when you step into the role of teacher, you're stepping into something big. But you don't have to pretend to be that big. You can just be like, wow, isn't this big? And let that hold the space and let that be what, where the transmission is coming from.
Thank you for that. And I sense that the how to all of this is practice. So talk to me about this word practice, because I know in my own life, it feels very elusive at times. And I've confused it for many years with merely an asana, the physical practice. And lately, like last week, no, just kidding. But, recently I'm really getting this sense that practice is so much deeper and more internal. And how would you describe the word practice or a yoga practice?
Again, I've just been weaving these sutras into my life so much because of the clarity that they provide. In, as Patanjali says, our biggest challenge is that we constantly miss the point. So when we go to the etymology of the word that he uses abhyasa, and then he has a whole pada or a whole chapter on sadhana. And so sadhana, as a practitioner, that's a sadhaka. And sadhana means to go directly to the goal, and na means of the eternal cosmic vibration. And then he uses the word abhyasa, which literally means to check the downward pull. So how we, the point of yoga is to joyfully engage with the creative potential that's within all of us, that we can be a part of life's beauty making and to embody something never before seen, not to emulate our teacher or emulate, you can buy your organic yoga clothes and your compostable yoga mat, but what does that really mean? But that we can be in this wonderful flowering and expression of consciousness unfolding and folding back in on itself. So abhyasa is seeing where we've gotten into this patterning. And the practice is one of making the effort of repatterning, of realigning, of reevaluating, and of being in that curious process. And I've been really opening up the Kaivalya-pada, which is the last chapter of the sutras. And it speaks so much about yoga as alchemy. And really that the process of yoga is one of being filled, of filling up the spaces. So if we're doing it and we're grasping, and it's such an interesting enigma that it takes so much effort to let go. And it, it's like you're trying to be more of yourself. You're becoming more of yourself, which is really a process of letting go. So it's just like wonderful to feel into that. And then, you can't just have abhyasa, as you know, you're a deep student of the sutras. That's like having one wing. You need two wings. So where abhyasa is the external expression of the consistency, the dedication, the effort to tatra stitau yatno abhyasaha, the effort of steady reevaluation, of sitting with yourself, of what's really important, who am I, how much am I reaching outside of myself. Then the internal aspect and expression is vairagya, which is being able to let go of the ranj, the colors of the mind and the moods, because we wake up and one day we're in a great mood, one day we're in a terrible mood. It's like it's always shifting, but to see that we're the awareness behind it. I love what Mr. Iyengar says. So he says, abhyasa is the ladder that you use to climb out of the rut. And then vairagya is to kick the ladder away. So practice, it's a really interesting thing. And I was like, oh my God, she's going to ask me about my personal practice. And, it was almost like there was a little bit of dread behind it. Because it's fluctuated so much over time. And sometimes it was for bigger choices, like wanting to get pregnant. And I was very, very thin and sinewy and muscly and bendy from the Ashtanga Vinyasa practice. And I had to let go of postures. There were certain postures I was doing that Krishnamacharya would prescribe as birth control, which was radical at the time, because of course the blessing for a young bride was, may you be the mother of 1,000 sons, So here he was, recognizing that women also needed to have control over their own bodies because of how the ripple effect that happened economically, psychologically, emotionally in a family. So yeah, there were things I had to let go of. I had to put on weight. It was such a big part of my identity. And that was a huge practice for me, letting go. And so my practice has shifted a lot over the years. And as I was looking at it, kind of like standing back, I feel like a big part of the practice is that we always want more, which is a good thing. Always leave yourself wanting more. But then there's like an undertone behind it of feeling, I should be doing more. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
oh, I could be doing more. I should be doing more yoga sutra study, or I should be doing more asana, or I should be doing more inversions or more pranayama, So that's that feels, I now like I'm in a confessional. And they say when you say something out loud, it doesn't have the same power over you. But yeah, and the beauty is there's also that commitment to the steadiness of practice where, yeah, it's going to shift and fluctuate, but that you're in it for a lifetime.
And what comes to mind is it's supposed to, right? It's supposed to fluctuate.
Yeah, listen, it depends on who you're talking to. I'm talking to you. A lot of
Yeah.
people, they're still maybe on the fence, they're kind of like weekend warriors and
Yeah.
whatnot. So like when I came to yoga, I knew that this was a lifetime commitment. I knew there was no turning back. And, sure, there was a honeymoon phase and whatnot, but I see a lot of people, they they come in hot, they come in strong, and then they dump it. It's like we've all heard those teachings where it's like, the kindling that burns up really quick. And then there's the wet kindling that really never catches fire and it's all smoke. So our ability to stoke the fire slowly. And sometimes it's just a little ember that we're carrying with us, but it's something that we're really protective of, and it's an awareness. And it'll be shifting in that in a different way. But it's a muscle, and honestly, if we're really paying attention, we're going to see what happens when we don't have a practice and the suffering that comes from that, the lack of clarity, because we're having to like project our issues so much more into the world. And so they say that practice is the himsa we commit on ourselves, which is, you have to take this into context, but himsa means the harming. Why is it harming? Because you don't get to sleep as long, or you don't get to, you don't have as much time. Like there's some sacrifice involved. You have to sit with yourself and sit with your own, desires and your own frustrations. So that there is some discomfort involved. But when we don't take the time to do that with ourselves, then it plays out into the world and it just becomes so much more complex. Yeah. So it does cost something, you gotta offer dana. You have to give some kind of an offering.
What's dana?
Dana is the offering, basically. So dana is like what you would, it's like the offering that you make your teacher. So back in the day, the country doctor, maybe you couldn't pay, but you would give some eggs, or you would give some cheese, or you might, help clean with the house. It's some kind of an exchange to help support the teacher who's helping to support you. It's not like yoga is today, where it's like people are ordering a burrito and they're expecting some kind of a service, and they have a certain expectation of how it should taste, and you're dishing it out. But it was really an exchange of energy that supported.
Less in the customer satisfaction business.
Yeah. I'm sure you've experienced that. It's like the expectations, that come in, and that's fine, but just, I'm not that person. I'm not that person right now. I'm sharing what's interesting to me, and then when I look in the room and I see what's going on, it's like it's such an interesting dance as a teacher. It's like being able to give the students what they need, not necessarily what they want, but also hopefully doing it in a way in which they feel nourished, and you're piquing their interest.
Yeah, I mean, because people come in with their psychological filters, their whole lineage, their background, and they hear these things. So I'm really getting, I mean, it's nuanced, it's like, if you don't have a practice, if you don't begin, and and it's like at least a decade in, like we're not just like, done doing it for a couple months. Like one has to really cultivate some time in before one can let it go. I mean, I feel that, and working with that, because I know for myself, as like I haven't, and this expectation, like the practice should look a certain way, and then I use all these excuses to say, well, it's okay that it doesn't look that way, and that's one thing. Or it can be, like you were saying, the practice of letting go. Okay, there's a different life phase coming on. I have to work at it this other in another approach?
And this, this takes a long time, but initially, and what was it that Llewellyn Vaughn said? It takes 20 years, it takes 20 years before your practice really lands for you. And it starts to happen in your relationships. So there's a strong commitment phobia, and there's this sense of like, well, it should be easy. And if it's hard, I don't want to do it. Or if it's hard, I'll do it once and then I've done it and it's over. But yeah, we need that consistency. I mean, it's kind of like, look at you go to kindergarten, and then I guess you can drop out around sophomore year. But there's a significant amount of time where you need to be held within a community and you need to be raised. And there seems to be a lot of fear around that. And also this sense of, this very, which is not a bad thing, but this individuation thing, which yoga tells us, yoga is the process of self-individuation. But there's a real gift about being held. It's like, you want to be individuated, but do you want to be individuated at 8 months old? No, you're not ready to do that. So having the container, having the cocoon is a wonderful thing. And let me tell you, and then your teachers will die. And then you'll be longing for them. Why didn't I spend more time? And again, I just, it's so lovely in the sutras, in the sadhana pada, on the chapter on practice. What's the first word?
Tapas.
Tapas. And tapas is often described as like the discipline. It's the austerity. And if we look up the word austerity is just being clear on what you need. It's not having the frivolities, but tapas is a fire, and it's an aching desire. So that longing is a wonderful thing, and learning how to use that longing in a disciplined way. What's the root of discipline? Disciple. That's being the student in which we learn it, in which we're held in that container. Can you hear my dog barking?
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay. It's very sweet.
Talk about Guru Chela. We have our Zito, who's the older dog, and this baby. And it's really quite amazing to see, because I don't think, he didn't choose to be the teacher, and he was always the baby, but we brought the baby in and he just stepped into it. And a lot of it is he's shutting her down.
Wow.
All the time. It's like this little Pomeranian, and they need socialization. So she's biting his tail, and he just like puts her down on the ground, opens his mouth and puts it on the back of her neck, and she goes flat.
Wow.
Goes flat. And it's like this beautiful dance of love, honestly.
Way to step up, Zito.
Yeah. And, honestly, we need people who are going to lift us up and just be like, whoa, slow down. When we look at yoga, it's like the reins. Yoga means to yoke. So someone's got to teach us how to use those reins, and we have to know how to be reined in. It's not such a terrible thing. It's kind of a beautiful thing, actually. I mean, how much of the time we're just like, just tell me what to do, We want somebody to tell us what to do. But then we don't,
Yeah, it's almost like I just want someone to fight with me. Just tell me what to do so I can say no.
Yeah. And I just loved, that whole process where it's like my teachers always raised the bar for me. And, I have really, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I mean, the like gunas, the prakriti of each of the teachers was kind of very different. But, I had one who would just like feed me fire and crack the whip. And I love that. And then one who was more, like my, would take me more into the sattvic phase. But each one of them, it's about like what is practice. Initially, it's something that you're developing. And by the way, going to class is not the same as having a practice, right? You go to class to learn through the teacher's lens. And then it's our work to take it home so that we can become familiar and develop, deepen our own inquiry and our own process of discovery. Yeah. Where was I going with this? Hang on a second. Can you prompt me?
Practice, and we don't go to class.
Oh, yeah.
Going.
So practice is where we're, developing that on our own. There was something else I was going to say, but I'm having a senior moment.
That's okay. I want to ask you, you talk about yoga. There's the elements, but you talk about it often as being both an art and a science. And if you remember what you were going to say, we can come back to that. And this has always really interested me because I sense that because, at some point you get the metaphysicist and the divinity student and the scientist, and they start talking, and at some point they get to this place where they both agree in this space of, the unknown, of magic, of metaphysics, and yeah. But I'm curious if you want to say more about yoga being both the art and the science.
Nimitam prayojakam prakritnam varana veda tu tata kshetrikava. So this is from the fourth pada. And I remember what I was going to say now.
Good.
So it's all part of this. Practice is what we do to get out of the inertia. That's where practice becomes puja. So first we learn, we go to a class, we learn the techniques. It's a science because it has been explored, it has been experimented, it has been verified. There's a logical aspect to it, and really yoga is an alchemy. So it's very much grounded in many trials, many situations. So we can see that like these things do, and now there's all kinds of wonderful more modern science-based research that corroborates this information, like that book Breath. It's fantastic, but it's just kind of showing the science behind the whole yogic techniques. The exhale is more important than the inhale. We can see it. We can even quantify it with blood tests and EEGs and EKGs, etc. Now, that sutra that I just chanted speaks about how yoga is varana veda. So if we do these practices, or we go into these practices, what it does is it starts peeling back the varana, which are the veils, to reveal the nature of prakriti, which is a creative force. So we use the science, we become really adept in the science, and then the creativity and the art starts coming through. So I am, one of the things that I loved with studying, under Baba Haridas was we were given the 4 purifications, the 4 kriyas. And you do them systematically. And yet every time you're doing them, and it's very interesting because, we'll be like, am I doing it correctly? Am I doing it correctly? And the years roll by, and then you kind of like go, oh, wow, I'm really obsessing over this. Have I even felt the practice? Has it even penetrated me? And a veil begins to fall. And then you start to, and there's a sutra for it, of course, because the sutra map out this process so we don't get stuck anywhere. We don't get stuck in the science, which is like just one half of the story, the logical. This is why actually postures are taught on the right side first, because it works the left brain hemisphere. Just tell me how to do it. It's the part of us that's a good soldier. I just want to follow directions. And that's good. You need to know how to add the yeast and how to add the, the leavening product, the sweetness, the sugar in order to get the dough to rise. You need that. But then you can start to play around with the recipe. So we're doing it so right and we're trying to be so good. And then we get the science down. And then there's like this realization, like, what does this feel like? And Patanjali says, Bhaya Vyantara Vishaya Kshepi Chaturtaha. Then eventually there's the fourth type of pranayama where you stop fixating on the length of your inhale, the length of your exhale, the pauses in between. And there's a complete psychological shift. There's a shift, which means that you you've maximized the ego, which wants to do it right, which wants to know it, which wants to get it. And there's like a dissolution of these veils that happens, and you step into this dynamic field, which really we can only experience it to know it. I'm sure we've all had those satori's where something just opens up. And it's really interesting, like, it's wonderful because you can always come back to the foundation of like, okay, I'm going to inhale through my left nostril, exhale through my right. I'm going to go to this practice. But then all of a sudden, as Venkatesh Ananda says, the practice just slips through your fingers and you're in this wonderful field of being filled, of being filled up. And so in these sutras here in the fourth pada, it speaks about how everything, did I talk about this last week? About how everything has kind of inherent potential. So if I didn't talk about this last week because it's been in my studies. Okay. So if you were to take sugar and you were to add a particular solvent to it, you could transform it into glucose and sucrose. If you were to add hydrochloric acid to it, you could transform it into pure carbon. So within everything in nature, there's certain potentialities depending on context and depending on how you work with the substance, but you're never going to be able to turn sugar into mercury. So there's certain things, and this is like the art. This is the art, is like we're using these yogic practices with consciousness to kind of like see, it's almost like chipping away at a geode to see what kind of gem is inside. And that's really the art of discovery. But we got to put the time in, and there's so, now they say whatever it is, 100,000 hours. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi said it's an average of 10 years. Like, you got to do the work. You're a dancer. You got to put in the time to train the nervous system, to train the musculature, to understand the nuances of the art form. The science, you got to do, like, oh my God, the tediousness of doing scales and arpeggios and working with those things. And then finally, when you've got that, when you've trained yourself through that discipline, then it said true creativity comes through you. And it's like the ego gets strong enough, and this is described as being in a state of flow where you just don't have enough bandwidth to worry about if you're doing it right. Because fortunately, you've done it enough where it's become like second nature. And then the artist describes it as being a vehicle for the creativity to flow through us. The dancer becomes one with the music, the surfer becomes one with the wave, the yogi realizes that like the entire multiverse is breathing through them. And when let's circle back to the tradition of yoga. It's said that these rishis and these rishikas, they were in this state of ecstasy where they were being spontaneously moved. And you look at little children, it's quite fascinating. They're going through the postures in their developmental phase. So it's encoded within us. And we're coming back to that. So the teachings are kind of like helping us. It's like that long road we spoke of in our last session of coming back to ourselves. And we're just going back, but we kind of need a teacher. We need to learn how to learn or remember how to learn.
That's great. Thank you so much. More to come.
More to come.
Yeah.
Great question, Shanae. Thank you so much for your just your curiosity. And I just love sitting and talking with you.
Oh, it's so great. I look forward to it each time.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Happy journey.
Thank you.